The Olympic torch, the herald of an Olympic Games to come, a potent symbol, the power of which is felt throughout the world.
The flame is one of the biggest symbols of the Games, and the Games are something exceptional. To go to the Olympic Games in this world of about 6 billion inhabitants, out of this 6 billion, you have only 10,000 gifted athletes that are good enough to participate. But then through the torch relay, you give the opportunity to 15 to 20, 25,000 people to actually be actors. They carry the flame.
The torch relay is not a race. It's a joyful gathering that prepares the people for the Games. We aren't waiting at the finish line for a winner.
If you're an ordinary person and the Olympics are coming to your country and you want to have contact with Olympic symbols and rituals, you don't have to have money, you don't have to know anybody, buy a hotel room, get yourself to the site, spend a fortune. If you want to have contact with the Olympic movement, all you have to do is get in your car and drive to where the Olympic flame relay is coming and stand on the street corner.
That's what's so significant about the Olympic torch relay. It's for everybody. It's for people from all walks of life, all sizes, all races, religions, and it crosses all barriers. And it gives people that united feeling that, hey, I'm a part of this. It really creates a very good and positive national pride in a community and in a country.
Traditionally, the torch travels from the ancient city of Olympia to Athens, then on to the host city, where it burns for the duration of the Games. But that tradition is not as old as the Games themselves. A torch relay was never part of the ancient Greek Games, but it was part of Greek culture.
The ancient model for the carrying of the Olympic torch were relays that were held in honor of various Greek gods. These were run from one altar to another, or from an altar into a particular city.
The first to reach the place where they normally carried out the sacrifice would light the fire. So the winner of the race had the honor of lighting the sacrificial flame with the fire from his own torch. And this is the basis of the story of the flame that you see at the modern Games.
Baron Pierre de Coubertin wanted the modern Olympic movement to reflect the rituals of the past. Throughout history, fire has been a potent symbol. In Greek mythology, fire was stolen from the gods and given to man by Prometheus, its power revered by all. Fire wasn't used as an Olympic symbol until 1928, when a flame burned at the Amsterdam Games. It captured the public's imagination. 4 years later, in Los Angeles, the flame burned once again.
A magnificent sight as the doves majestically in flight move onward and upward, and in the background, the Olympic flame.
But these were not authentic Olympic flames. They had been kindled in the host city, not at Olympia. In 1932, Karl Diem from the German Olympic Committee saw the Los Angeles flame and wanted to develop the idea. When the Games went to Berlin in 1936, it was Diem who introduced the first Olympic torch relay.
He was given the responsibility to supervise the Olympic Games in Berlin as General Secretary. At the time, he saw this as his life's work. He decided to make the torch relay part of the program. This innovation must be credited to Diem. It was his doing. He made it happen, and everybody was inspired by the idea. I think it was the best advertising campaign of all time for the Olympic Games.
For the ritual of the torch lighting, Diem found inspiration in the ceremonies of ancient Greece.
In the ruined Olympia Stadium near Athens, scene of the ancient Greek Olympic Games, the flame is kindled for this year's 11th Olympiad.
The new Olympic flame was lit from the sun's rays at Olympia and taken by runners to the Olympic Stadium in Berlin. Leni Riefenstahl directed Olympia, the famous and infamous film of the Berlin Games.
Carl Diem organized the whole Games. He spoke to me about the torch, and I immediately had this vision. You can't make a film about the Games without starting at the site of the ancient competitions. So I had this idea of first portraying the fire, then the classical athlete coming alive and entering the reality of the stadium. This was an image that worked well for me.
Riefenstahl used actors to recreate her classical scenes. The actual relay lasted 12 days. Over 3,000 runners carried the torch from Olympia to Berlin.
Berlin's great day dawns with the arrival of the Olympic flame at the end of its 2,000-mile journey from Greece. And meanwhile, a packed stadium and flag-draped cheering streets greet Chancellor Hitler on his way to perform the opening ceremony.
Inevitably, the first torch relay became tainted by the regime in power in Germany at the time.
The connection was in the way that the Nazi propaganda machine, as with the Games overall, seized the event. There is no direct connection between the Nazi government and the torch relay. The torch relay was a product of the organizing committee, like the Games themselves. Nevertheless, the Games and the torch relay became politically influenced and politically exploited.
Lola Harding-Irmer helped to choreograph the Berlin opening ceremony, which reached its climax as Fritz Schilgen, a young German athlete, completed the last leg of the relay.
It looked tremendous, and when he carried it up the steps and then turned around and stood for a second and looked up into the sky, and it was so impressive that there was a hush over the audience. And then afterwards, the applause, it was absolutely a standing ovation.
Diem's innovation was so captivating that little has changed since 1936. The lighting ceremony at Olympia remains as it was in Diem's day. The ceremony is held before the ruins of the Temple of Hera at Olympia. The priestesses call on Apollo to bring forth the sun's rays, and on Zeus to bring peace to the world. A scaphia is used to kindle the flame.
It is a very emotional moment. Olympia is a magical place. The priestesses are in tears. However many times we perform, the emotions still run high and hearts beat faster. It is not just a performance. It is much more than that. After a brief stop at an olive tree, the symbol of peace, we move into the stadium. We call on the gods again, in a verse by Pindar in ancient Greek, to ask for peace and brotherhood, and we pass the torch to the first athlete.
The heritage of ancient Greece was the inspiration for the torch for the Athens Games of 2004. Andreas Varoutsos was chosen as the designer. His model, the symbolic olive leaf.
Apart from the substance of the torch, I paid a lot of attention to the fact that the torch should include all aspects of our country, both at an historical and cultural level. By using an international language, it would reflect the spirit of Greece and bring values of peace, love, and harmony to wherever the torch travels.
Every Olympic torch has to go through a rigorous development process. Sam Shelton was the man responsible for manufacturing the torches for Atlanta in 1996 and Salt Lake City in 2002.
You have to use high production manufacturing techniques because you're talking about building 10 or 15,000 of these.
Well, let's just, since we're heating it down there, it's just being conducted, that's copper. In other words, ideally, this will be stainless and it won't get all that hot.
Weight is always a challenge, to try to get enough fuel in there to burn for approximately 20 minutes, and visibility is always an issue.
Definitely a good flame. In other words, you can see it the whole way.
On a sunlit day with windy conditions, the visibility of the flame can be a problem. A new product can always be delayed a week, a month, when problems come up. They don't delay the relay. So when you have a problem, you got to do whatever is necessary to keep things on schedule. The other unique thing about it is the fact that if it goes out or if it doesn't work right, it's the whole world knows your mistakes.
Since 1936, the torch relay has become an integral part of the Olympic Games. The torch is a way for the host city to put its own unique stamp on each Games. Through it, they can reflect its history, culture, and aspirations. In 1948, the Games were hosted by London. Just 3 years after the end of World War II, the peaceful symbolism of the torch was particularly poignant. The first torchbearer, a corporal in the Greek army, discarded his military uniform in a gesture of peace. Civil war in Greece meant that the Greek runners carried the torch only the short distance from Olympia to the coast, rather than to Athens. It was taken to Italy by warship. From there, it was escorted to London. British athlete Sandy Duncan.
I thought, here's the Olympic flame lit in Olympia, and we've got to get it to Wembley. I followed in a Rolls-Royce, obvious to say, not my own. The most thrilling moment for me was going to Lausanne. There was the wife of Pierre de Coubertin and the whole Olympic family gathered together for a little ceremony at his grave. I was delighted when the cauldron was lit. My job was done. It had arrived.
The Oslo Games of 1952 were the first Olympic Winter Games to have a torch relay. The flame wasn't lit at Olympia. It was kindled in the hearth of the chalet of Sondre Norheim, the 19th century pioneer of Nordic skiing. "94 skiers carried the flame the 225 kilometers to Oslo. The relay journey for the Summer Games of 1952 was much more complicated. The most direct route from Olympia to the host city, Helsinki in Finland, went through the Soviet Union. But the Cold War meant that the border remained closed, even to the Olympic flame. For the first time, the Olympic flame took to the air. It was transferred to a miner's lamp in Athens and flown to Copenhagen in Denmark, before going north to the Arctic Circle, then south into Finland. For the 1956 Summer Games at Melbourne, the Olympic flame entered the Southern Hemisphere for the first time, making several stops en route. On reaching Australia's northeast coast, Con Verivis, a local with Greek heritage, started the first leg of the relay.
I vividly remember the Canberra jet bomber carrying the sacred flame, landing at Cairns Airport. I felt I was running in a dream, oblivious to anything around me. The only problem I had was the flame from the torch would burn the side of my head as my arm became tired. The greatest moment of my run was when I lit the torch of the second runner, an Aboriginal lad, Anthony Mark. Suddenly, the reality of the event hit me.
The experience was one all torchbearers would treasure.
Letters were sent from the state body in Sydney to all the athletic clubs throughout New South Wales. If members would like to participate in the torch relay, they had to run the mile under 6 minutes. So there were 3 of us from Tamworth nominated to carry the torch at Port Macquarie. That's how I came to be one of the torchbearers. It was a great thrill to me.
During the Games, John was one of many people who stayed with relay organiser Alec Jamieson. For John, the Olympic relay was responsible for lighting another flame.
Our relationship started through my father bringing John home to our house in Melbourne. He had asked us a few years previous to that, could he stay with us during the Olympic Games? And so that fortnight of the Games, we were there sitting together at the Games every day. 6 weeks later, we announced our engagement, and it just seemed as though it was all just meant to happen. Undoubtedly, the Olympics did bring us together. We've been happily married now for 47 years.
Here in the land of the Southern Cross, in the colourful city of Melbourne, we await the arrival of the Olympic flame, the symbolic emblem of true sportsmanship.
Joan's father was responsible for overseeing the final stages of the relay. The last torchbearer's identity was a closely guarded secret.
We had no idea who was going to come in with the torch for that final moment. Then I can remember a lot of chatter going on round about, saying, "It's Ron Clark, it's Ron Clark," and then the excitement was just electric.
As I ran around the arena, chunks of burning magnesium fell off the sparkling candle. It was like running with a live, sparkling firecracker. There were only a few hairs singed and a few holes in the white t-shirt. The more I protested that it all looked much worse than it really was, the more everyone assumed I was being modest. I was never at risk of suffering any sort of burn, but let's not spoil a good story with the facts.
The torch relay to the 1960 Summer Games of Rome was the first to be televised. The world should have seen Baldassare Sparacino carry the torch in his home city.
I was supposed to carry the torch, and I had it with me the day before. But my father was terminally ill, and I lost my chance to run in the relay. But I was allowed to keep the torch. My pain was heavy to bear. Only the Olympic torch helped me to keep going.
In 1964 was the first time that the lighting ceremonies for both summer and winter games were held at Olympia. In the summer, it went to Tokyo, traversing 11 countries on the way. Japan, the relay passed through Hiroshima, which just 19 years earlier had been destroyed by the first atomic bomb. Yoshinori Sakai carried the flame into the stadium. Known as the Hiroshima baby, he'd been born in the city on the day the bomb was dropped. For the 1968 Mexico Games, the torch traveled to Spain, from where it was to cross the Atlantic and follow Christopher Columbus's route to Central America.
I followed the flame from where it was lit in Olympia. I went as a delegate of the International Olympic Committee and the Spanish government. Our journey to Mexico was quite incredible. We really understood that the discovery of America was quite miraculous.
In the Americas, the flame was taken ashore at Veracruz, the place where conquistador Hernando Cortés had landed 449 years before. The relay paused for a celebration of Aztec culture.
The ceremony was carried out in the Valley of the Dead, between the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. That was simply breathtaking.
Enriqueta Basilio became the first woman to light the Olympic cauldron. For the 1972 Winter Games, the flame again headed east, to Japan. There, two flames journeyed north to Sapporo, one along the east coast, the other on the west. Ryoichi Tanaka, one of the torchbearers.
At the time, I hadn't been interested in the torch relay at all. But for some reason, I was one of the people nominated. I was really surprised. I'll never forget the crowds of people who were waving little flags and cheering us on. The experience of taking part in the Sapporo Winter Games is something I'll never forget.
That summer, 36 years after the Berlin Games, the flame was once again carried to Germany. Harold Lieb, a 25-year-old German, carried the torch on the final day of its journey.
When I read that I had been chosen, I felt dizzy and cried with joy. It would have been so wonderful to have our people from the East participating at the Olympic Games together with us. It would have been so nice. A thought came to my mind. Memories are a paradise from which you can't be expelled.
In 1976 brought an innovation that symbolized the growth of 20th century technology. In Athens, a device picked up the flame's ionized particles and transferred them into electronic impulses. These were then transmitted by satellite across the Atlantic to Ottawa in Canada, where they activated a laser beam, which relit the flame. In a matter of seconds, the flame had been beamed halfway around the world. It was then carried in more traditional guise to Montreal. In the stadium, a gesture of unity between Canada's French and English-speaking people saw Sandra Henderson and Stéphane Préfontaine light the cauldron together.
The organizers decided to represent a young country looking to its future. Sandra was 16 and I was 15. I heard the loudest roar of applause I had ever heard. I was excited beyond belief.
The torch for the 1980 Lake Placid Winter Games was carried 1,600 kilometers by just 52 runners. Each American state was represented. Alabama by Richard Overbay.
We began the run in a light snowfall, and we ran a pathway through hundreds of patriotic people waving American flags. I remember the camaraderie of our teammates, growing tired yet remaining spirited as we ran long hours. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Later that year, for the Moscow Games, the Olympic flame traveled to the Soviet Union for the first time. The torch relay to Los Angeles was the most elaborate to date, and it had more problems than most. The influence of money in sport was growing. In 1984, it caused major rifts within the Olympic movement.
Die Amerikaner haben also das sogenannte Youth Legacy.
The Americans developed the so-called Youth Legacy Kilometer program. This meant every kilometer of the torch relay was sold. And the money was meant to be used for, and indeed was, used for sporting and youth organizations in America. But this model, which allowed private sponsors to buy one or more kilometers, was not understood in Greece. There were big protests against the selling of the flame, the sacred flame.
Over 3,000 torchbearers raised more than $10 million for youth programs in the United States. Memories of the 1936 Berlin Games were revived at the Seoul Games of 1988. The winner of the 1936 marathon was Korean, Ki Tae-sung. But the medal was awarded to Japan, which was occupying Korea at the time. In 1988, he was awarded the honor of carrying the torch into the Olympic Stadium under his Korean name, Son Ki-jung. In Barcelona in 1992, it was the method by which the cauldron was lit that made the headlines. Paralympian archer Antonio Rebollo was asked to fire a flaming arrow over 100 meters into the cauldron.
I was very scared. I thought, if this guy misses, it will be such an embarrassing moment in front of the entire world. but he got it spot on.
In 1994, the Olympic flame went to Lillehammer in Norway. Sven Strand, one of the torchbearers.
Getting ready for the run, the tension rose. When I saw the torch in the hand of the person running the leg preceding me, I suddenly thought, imagine if I fall and break a leg or get a heart attack or something else. But suddenly I was actually running along with the torch steady in my grip. It was one of my finest moments.
When the torch reached the opening ceremony, it made one of the most spectacular entrances in Olympic history. Crown Prince Haakon Magnus of Norway became the first member of a royal family to light the Olympic cauldron. In 1996, to celebrate the Olympic centenary, the torch traveled to all the previous Olympic host cities. In Berlin, the final torchbearer from 1936, Fritz Schilgen, relit the Olympic cauldron. Over 10,000 torchbearers carried the torch to Atlanta. They were chosen through a community hero selection process. Anyone could nominate someone they considered to be local heroes, but some slots were left vacant. To find these, torchbearer manager Cheryl Cagle contacted local community leaders.
They'd come back and say, we can get the smartest guy in the school, or we can get the captain of the football team, or the head cheerleader. And I'd say, no. I said, we want the child that sits by himself in a lunchroom. We want the child that never gets picked for anything. We want the child that being selected for this is going to truly make a difference in their life.
Travis Roy carried the Atlanta torch on his wheelchair.
Travis was 19 years old, an incredible hockey player. The first game of his collegiate career had been slammed into the boards and suffered a broken neck, and spent the next year learning how to live as a quadriplegic. He looked at me and he said, do you mind laying the torch on top of my head so that I can feel how heavy it is? And you know, it just dawned on me that that was the only part of his body that he could actually feel the weight of the torch. So I laid it up on his head, and he said, okay, I'm ready now. And so it's my favorite story because he may not have laid one hand on that torch, but he carried the flame higher than anybody because he really knew the weight of the flame and what it represented.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Olympic flame is about to enter the stadium.
It was a world heavyweight boxing champion and bronze medalist, Evander Holyfield, who carried the flame into the stadium. Swimming champion Janet Evans then handed over to the final torchbearer, another Olympic champion.
A little boy, 11-year-old boy, sent in a letter saying that he thought Muhammad Ali would be the best final torchbearer. I think it was the first recommendation we'd gotten from Muhammad Ali.
In Atlanta, everything had run on time. Before the Nagano Winter Games in 1998, the runners were encouraged to take their time, so that they and the spectators could savor every moment. Hideo Tanaka was involved in both.
When I took part in the 1996 Atlanta Paralympics, the beautiful burning flame had made a deep impression on me. 2 years later, I was actually holding it myself. I thought about the runner who had just handed it to me, the runner I would be passing it on to, the vast crowds of people watching. I felt a part of something of vast importance.
The warm glow of the Olympic flame was never felt so strongly than at the Salt Lake City Olympic Winter Games. The ideals of peace and harmony have always been at the heart of the Olympic movement. Sometimes these ideals can be hard to find. In the build-up to the 2002 Games, the world was devastated by the horror of September 11th, 2001.
Our original plan was to do a national torchbearer announcement on September 12th in New York City with the mayor. So you can imagine that it affected it quite deeply. And to the point that we all wondered if we would even have a torch relay. But the calls and the letters and the emails just kept coming in and just encouraging us to move forward.
The torch became a symbol of hope for America.
Precious cargo there.
"17-year-old Nadia Ben Youssef, a torchbearer in Montana.
The day was anything but ordinary. The motto of the Olympic torch was, "Light the fire within," a phrase I would see engraved on the side of each torch. The flame symbolizes strength, life, and passion. Its journey throughout the United States was one of peace. I was carrying a flame of hope, of goodness. I was part of a nationwide chain of love.
On its journey to the 2000 Games at Sydney, Australia, the torch relay reminded the world that the Olympic Games belong to everyone, not just the host city.
The Olympic torch relay travelled around Oceania. They're tiny islands in the Pacific. They will most probably not host an Olympic Games in their future, but here they were able to be part of the Australian Games and feel part of that. These are my games too, and they've had that wonderful experience of showcasing their heroes as torchbearers.
You're doing fine.
In Australia, the relay began its journey at Uluru, a sacred site for the indigenous population. The first Aboriginal Australian to win an Olympic gold, Nova Paris-Kneebone, carried the torch over the first leg of the relay. The flame was carried the length and breadth of Australia. Like the torch, the Olympic spirit is passed from generation to generation. For some families, like the Cottons, the tradition is long-lasting.
Our eldest granddaughter, Melinda, was a torchbearer. It was a big thrill to think that Melinda's great-grandfather had organised the torch relay for the Melbourne Olympics, the Victorian section, and then to think that her grandfather had carried the torch also in the 1956 Olympic torch relay, and then here was she as a 14-year-old carrying the torch for the Sydney Olympics.
The torch relay has become an unexpected opportunity to involve thousands of people in the Olympic experience.
Sometimes I'd go into a town before the torch relay had arrived. The town would be beautifully cleaned and prepared and ready for the relay to come, but some of the people were quite cynical. But once the torch relay had been through, it was like magic dust had been sprinkled across that village or that town, and there was such enthusiasm for the Olympic Games after the torch relay had been through.
Anela Powell, a torch relay media officer who travelled with the relay around Australia.
I saw magic happen every day. The depth of emotion we saw and felt every night as people waited to see the Olympic flame arrive. The Olympic flame had an ability to unite everyone within its orb with an amazing sense of joy, peace and goodwill. I wish we could have bottled the feelings so we could pull it all out and have a sniff when times get tough.
The climax of the relay to Sydney reinforced the Olympic ideals of peace and harmony. Kathy Freeman was the final torchbearer.
A lot of Indigenous people were very proud. A lot of Australians were proud. What actually went on was a powerful symbol of hopefully what is yet to come for Australia in terms of the black and white relations and acceptance of each other's differences.
Athens 2004, and the Olympic Games returned to Greece for the first time since 1896. In honour of this, the plans for the torch relay were big. The Olympic flame crossed every habitable continent, reaching Africa, India and South America for the first time. Every city which had hosted the Summer Games was revisited by the torch. In preparation for the 2006 Winter Games in Torino, the flame embarked on a 64-day tour of Italy. In total, over 10,000 torchbearers carried the flame to the spectacular opening ceremony. One world, one dream, the theme for the Beijing Games in 2008. Organisers wanted the Olympic spirit to reach as many people as possible. From Beijing, the torch travelled around the globe, covering 137,000 kilometres, the longest distance covered since the tradition began in 1936. The relay even included an ascent to the top of Mount Everest. The torch's final leg was to the opening ceremony, where the relay continued around the stadium. Last to take the flame was former Chinese Olympic gymnast Li Ning, who spectacularly ran around the upper walls of the stadium before lighting the fuse to the Olympic cauldron. – 2010 saw 2 Olympic torch relays. The first was for the Winter Games in Vancouver. The torchbearers took the flame on a journey across Canada, visiting over 1,000 communities. Later that year, the inaugural Youth Olympic Games were held in Singapore. The mission, to unite youth around the world and spread the Olympic values of excellence, friendship, and respect. The Olympic torch, the burning symbol and glowing embodiment of the ideals of Olympism.
No matter how powerful the Olympic flame and what it represents, the flame inside each of us is greater than that flame. What the Olympic flame does is just reflect off of each of us and inspire us to live up to the ideals that the Olympic flame represents.